And so at this point, I'm just going to pause before we go into the demo and ask if there are any questions at this stage.
We don't have any questions at this point, so
No
yeah,
problem.
yeah,
I
we
shall
can go on. Yeah,
dive into the demo then. So just bear with me while I come out of the presentation and hop over to Classmate. So hopefully, and Dari, if you could just confirm if you can see Classmate, the
yeah,
Classmate homepage on the screen, that's fantastic. Thank you. I should minimize the screen. So this is the Classmate homepage. The URL is very simply crowd.cochrane.org/classmate. And like all Cochrane systems, in order to use it, you need a Cochrane login. And you can just log in at the top. Just move that out of the way. If you don't have a Cochrane account, that's not a problem. You can just create one. They're free. It takes a couple of minutes to do it. I do have one. So I shall log in. And once logged in, it will take you to your Classmate dashboard. And on your Classmate dashboard, there are two main functions here that you can perform. The first is that you can see all the former Classmate activities that you've set up. They might be ones that are complete, they might be ones that are still running. And you can, each of these tiles represents a different Classmate activity that I've set up in the past. You can get some high-level metrics about those activities from the panels. You can see which task was used. You can see the name that I gave the activity. You can see its status. You can see a number that relates to how many records were screened for that activity, when that activity happened, and when it ended. If it's still ongoing, you can see the progress in terms of time running, and you can see the progress in terms of number of records set up. This is just a test one that I set up earlier, I think today or yesterday. If I want more detail about them, I can click on them and I will show you that in a moment. But the other main function of the Classmate dashboard is that you can set up your new Classmate activity. And there are three things that you can do. You can set up a new learning activity, you can set up a new task, or you can set up a new pathway. So each of those correspond to those things I was just describing in the presentation. So this would be a new standalone micro learning activity. And this would be a single micro task. And under pathway, you could either choose one of the two preset pathways that we have, or you could now create your own pathway. So I'm going to briefly show you how to set up each one of these activities. I'll start with a new learning activity and you just click on that. This then starts a series of screens that just asks you about what it is you're wanting to do. So the first question is really, which of the learning modules do you want to use for this activity? And so you can have a look in the pick list and choose one that you want. You might choose Introducing Health Equity. If I've selected that, it'll tell me a little bit about what's in that module. And if that's what I want, I can click Next. And then I get asked, well, what do I want to call this course? Now I can just call it the same thing, Introducing Health Equity, but this is a chance for you to give a name that's slightly more personal to your course in your context. So it might be that you're just running a session on a Tuesday afternoon. So you just want to call it, Tuesday's learning activity. And whatever you call it will then appear in the invitation that you send to your students if you decide to send invitations to your students. You don't have to do that, but we'll get to that bit in a minute. So Tuesday's learning activity, and then I'll just click next. And then if I was associated or based at, say, a university, it's quite useful for us in Cochrane to know where people are based if they're using Classmate. You could enter that information here. You don't have to, and just click next. And then here you have a chance just to add a little bit more information about why you're doing this. And this is content that will also appear in the invitation email to your students. And you just can say, let's learn about health equity. Something brief, just to give some additional kind of context to what you're trying to do. And then you get to the part where you can enter the timings for your course. So just click on the enter start date field and it comes up with the calendar. I'm going to say, let's start it from today. I'm just going to start it from what was midnight. I can choose to start it from any time really. I'll keep it simple for this demo. And end date, have it end tomorrow. So then I just click next. Now it's here that I can invite I can add the email addresses of those who I want to take part. I'm not actually inviting them yet. I'm just putting in the email addresses of my students. I don't have to do it at this stage if I don't know them, or if I'm just basically setting up some Classmate activities for a future date, that's fine. I'm just going to pop in my email address for this demo. Check I've got that right. Yep. I can add a few email addresses and then add more at a later date. And I'll show you, remove email addresses as well at any point. So then I just click done. And that's it. That's that Classmate activity all set up. And what it's taken me to is what's called the Participants tab. So as I was just describing, I don't need to add my participants in the setup mode. I can add them at any point during the Classmate activity. If I wanted to add another participant here, just simply click on Add Participants and pop in another email address and then click Add. What I'm seeing here on the screen is that I've added someone called Anna Knoll-Storr, that's me. And what it's showing me is that I've actually done this course before. Now, of course, I have done this course before. I wrote this course. This is not a surprising status. Most of your students will probably not have even used Cochrane Crowd before, so their status will be completely different. They'll just be new to Cochrane Crowd, and it will tell you here whether they have logged in yet or not. And as you can see, you can start to track their progress through the modules. So the Introducing Health Equity module, for example, is made up of 6 micro modules. What it's saying here is that I've completed 5 of them. I've got 1 more to go. If I was just doing this live as part of this course, having not previously done this, it would tell me when I was last active during this Classmate session. I've talked a bit about inviting students. So what you can do is if you are wanting to get a group of students taking part in a Classmate activity, you can add their emails, but then you can invite them by clicking Send Invites. And that will send them an email that says, so-and-so has invited you to a Classmate activity. And it will then provide instructions on how to access that Classmate activity that they've been invited to. And those instructions vary slightly depending on whether they already have a Cochrane account or if they are completely new to Cochrane Crowd. So I'm going to now head back to the dashboard and briefly take you through setting up a new task. I'm then also going to show you what the student sees from their perspective, because at the moment, this is all from the perspective of the teacher or the trainer who's setting up a classmate activity for their students. So to set up a new task, it's very similar to setting up a new standalone learning activity. You select a task from the pick list. Let's go with RCT identification. You can read a little bit more about it here and click next. You might want to call this something. I'm going to call this workshop. Next, again, you can put in your institution if you're based at somewhere, and then you can just pop in a bit of extra context and then set your dates. So let's have this running again from now to next week. You can set a challenge or a classmate activity for pretty much as long as you want it to run for. You can have them for as short as, I think, about half an hour is the shortest length of time, or spanning weeks, if not months. There are a couple of differences when you're setting up a task compared to when you're setting up standalone learning activity. So one of the differences here is that you can put your students into teams. So let's say I did want to have 2 teams. I would just select 2 here and click next. And then I can give my teams a name and I can put my students into each of those teams. So I can, the reds, the blues. And then just as before, I can either add students now at this point if I know. So I will just add myself. And I'm putting me in the red team, and I can add someone else into the blue team if I wanted to. I can do that at a later stage. I can do that at any point during the challenge or during the activity. And so I'm going to click next. And then this is another addition that you can have for micro tasks, as opposed to when you just set up a standalone learning activity through Classmate. This is called, these are called banner messages. And essentially what these are just single sentence or even shorter than that, just a few word messages that will appear across the top of the screen when the student is doing the task. So when a student is live doing a task, you can have it so that you can have a message come up that says something like, let's do one. So let's say 1 minute into the challenge, let's have a banner message that says, hello everyone, welcome to this task. And you can click add. And so what you've done there is you've loaded up a message ready to be shown when the task is 1 minute into being live. You can load as many banner messages as you like. They don't have to just be set at minutes into the challenge. They can be done at hours, days, or towards the end of the challenge as well, which is quite nice if you want to have a bit of a excitement towards a task's end. You can have it so that it appears after a certain number of records have been assessed, or you can have it appear after a certain number of records have been completed. And the difference between these two is subtle, but assessed means that a record has received at least one classification on it, one answer. And a completed record is where it has received the required number of classifications on it. You don't have to load all your messages in. You can just add them live during during the classmate activity, and then click done, and that's your next classmate activity all set up. And again, it will show your participants down here. It's just taking a little bit of time to load. And there we go. We've got me. We know that I'm signed up. I haven't yet gone on to this particular task because I've just set it up. The team that I've put in is the red team. I've done no classifications yet, no accuracy to show yet. What I'm going to do now is just hop over to Cochrane Crowd and hope that we will be able to see. I'm just logging in now to Cochrane Crowd. So once I'm logged into Cochrane Crowd, I'm on my Cochrane Crowd dashboard, and you'll see there's a panel called Classmate. And this is where, if I click on this, I should be able to see the things I've been invited to from Classmate. And so we can see here the Introducing Health Equity Microlearning that I'd been invited to. I've invited myself to it. And we can see also the RCT identification task. And sadly, there are no records at the moment, but if there were, I could start screening it. If I was completely new to RCT identification, I would first of all have to complete the training module there, which I described earlier, which is just made up of some practice records. And then once that's done, I'd be able to screen live records. We do load in new records every day, and we do keep an eye on not running out. We have just had a couple of very, very popular classmate challenges going on, so that will be why we have just very temporarily got through all our records. I'm going to pop back now to Classmate because the final part that I wanted to show you was the pathway functionality. So this is new, and if you click on that, again, it follows a similar sort of step approach to setting up a pathway, just as you've just followed those step-by-step approach to setting up a microlearning task or setting up some standalone learning. What you can do with this is either select from our existing pathways, or you can create a new one altogether. And you can see here that I created my own one, which I called Anna's Awesome Pathway. And now it appears in my list. That would not appear for anyone else using Classmate. That is the pathway that I have created myself for my students. I'm going to create a completely new one from scratch though today by clicking on Create New Pathway. So I've got to give it a name. I'm going to give it pathway, just something. You can add a bit of description, and again, that will appear in your invite to the crowd, but also on the tasks page on Cochrane Crowd. So let's say I could type. Okay. You can put in an estimate of the time you think it will take to complete the pathway. It depends a little on what you've decided to put into the pathway, so that is potentially something you can come back to once you've built your pathway. And your pathway is made up of tasks and learning activities. So first of all, yeah, I think I will start off actually with a learning activity in my pathway. And they are done in order. So you have to get your order, think about your order. So I think key concepts is a great way to start. So we'll start with that. So I'm going to add that. And that appears here. So this will be the first activity in the pathway. I'm going to get my students to do the micro-learning on key concepts in health research. And the threshold is around, well, what do they need to do to progress to the next task? So it's automatically populated with 7 because there are 7 micro learning modules within the key concepts micro learning. So that's fine. I'm going to leave that as that. They have to do all 7 so that they can then progress to the next task. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a task. So I will add RCT identification. And click add. And then that appears as the second activity in my pathway. Now here, I don't have to put in any sort of threshold. If they just look at the task, they could still then progress to the next activity if there was one. But I'm going to actually say, okay, they need to screen 10 records. Okay, once they've done 10 records, the next activity will be available for them to do. And so I'm then going to say, let's have another learning activity. Let's do study design for complete beginners. Perhaps should have done that before the RCT one. But anyway, I'm then going to say add task. And so that then becomes the third activity in my pathway. And I'm probably going to stop at that point and say create. Oh, and I do need to complete how long, I think. So now I've got these 3 things in. Well, I'm going to say it will take about an hour for each. So 3 hours in total. And then hopefully, and that's created. And now that's in there. So I can use that pathway and then go next. And then it just takes me through those series of questions. Now, how long do I want this pathway to be available for my students for? Well, perhaps I want to give them a fair bit longer. I might take it into the next month. Let's go into May. And just to say that if your students, if you're in a different sort of time zone, Classmate will automatically adjust the time zone for users in other time zones. Let me click next. And then as the norm, you can add your students at this point, or you can add them later on once your activity is saved. And so here it is. And what you get here is just a small visualization detailing the pathway progress. So that's a very quick look at the 3 main kind of Classmate activities that you can set up using Classmate. As I say, they're all really straightforward to do, I think. We can see some of them here now. So we have this one here. But what I wanted to also just show you was another activity that I ran several years ago now, where what we can see here with a group of information specialists, essentially, divided into teams, the lions and the giraffes. But I wanted to just show you here because you can see here the number of classifications that people did, but also the accuracy that they achieved on that. We can also, under the Who's Winning tab, see which team was in the lead and which team eventually won, which was the giraffes. And I've also got a reports tab, so I can then drill down further into what classifications were made, when the classifications happened, and at some point during that, you can't really see it very well on that table, it'll be somewhere there, but how many people took part, how many were active, so you can have people join up but then actually don't do anything, and then the individual details, and you can export the details as well.